Hi, I'm Cressel Anderson. This is Makercise. In this episode, I'll show you my initial attempt at the faceplate for the Gingery Lathe, and I'll also show you how it turned out in the end. I turned down the end of the spindle so that I could fit a 1/2-inch pulley onto the end of the spindle. And then I fastened a circular piece of plywood to the pulley. I turned it down just using a chisel. This type of mold is what's known as an open mold. In some of the previous videos, I've used a closed mold, which has both a cope and a drag. So there's sand on both sides, and in this case, there's just a drag. Hydrogen from the atmosphere dissolves into molten aluminum, and you want to liberate that to avoid porosity in your castings. Around about this time, I got feedback from a viewer on using Epsom salts to degas the aluminum, so I gave that a shot here. And I must not have gotten something right, but there'll be more on that later. The temperature of this metal is much hotter than you'd really want for pouring, but that was before I implemented my Raspberry Pi kiln thermostat. I found the center of the casting with a compass, and then I drilled a hole through the part. I was ready to turn this faceplate at the same time I was working on the pulleys, so I super glued the faceplate to the pulley, and that wasn't strong enough, so then I super glued it to both the pulley and the spindle. To be able to mount it on the spindle permanently, it needed a 5/8 inch hole. I drilled a test hole in an ingot with a 5/8 inch spade bit, and I could tell there was too much slop on the 5/8 inch shaft. So that was one reason why I abandoned this initial attempt. And another is the incredible porosity on this part that I cast. It's due to the magnesium sulfate, that's Epsom salts, that I added to the faceplate during the casting process. I posted video on Facebook to see what folks thought back in about April, and Vince Thigpen mentioned he thought it would be porous and weak. It's pretty thick, so it still seems fairly sturdy, but it certainly is porous, so that's part of the reason that I made a second attempt. The second faceplate came out much thinner because of the, I guess, the surface tension kind of pooling up and making the top of the initial casting much thicker, but when I decided to abandon that attempt, I weighed this part along with a sprue just to make sure that I had enough metal for the second attempt at the faceplate. I made modifications to the initial pattern for the faceplate. I cut slots in it and I drilled a hole so that way I could cast it on a mandrel. To cut the slots on the faceplate pattern, I attached it to this board and I used my router table in a similar manner to what I did on the tailstock. And then I used a file to kind of add some draft to the inside of these holes. And the second time I cast it, I did a closed mold and used that 5/8 inch shaft as a casting mandrel. In the book, David Gingery describes casting on a mandrel. Basically, this is a process where you insert a steel rod coated in soot into the mold, and then you cast the part around that steel shaft. He goes on to say you can drive it out. I have not had good luck trying to drive out the mandrel, but it's a great way to get the hole to match the shaft. One of the upgrades that I did during the course of casting the faceplate was I got a CO2 cylinder and a welding regulator so that I could degas the molten aluminum using carbon dioxide as opposed to the magnesium sulfate, and I really like it a lot better. I also made use of my kiln, which is on my Internet of Things OpenHab implementation at my house. It's really great. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. It really makes the casting process a lot easier. I get notifications and I can watch that temperature without having to babysit it like I did before I added the electronics. Bad idea. Whoops. Totally forgot about this being on wood. Bad idea. Okay, so two things. One was I forgot that board was under there and that started smoking. The bigger thing is copper for the degassing tube running CO2 through this thing. Not the best choice. I think the aluminum either dissolved the copper or just kind of weakened it to the point where it didn't work very well. Probably need to replace this with a steel tube. After I cut off the sprue and the riser, I tried to drive out the mandrel, and this is what I'm talking about. It just won't budge. With such a large mandrel, drilling out that rod is much more challenging than on smaller parts like the ball handles. Look at that pile of swarf. I filed down some of the mushrooming that was caused by my initial hammering attempt, and then I drove the rod out. Taking such a wide cut created a lot of chatter. It actually caused one of the gib adjustment screws to vibrate out. After just a little bit more being stubborn, I decided I would take shallower cuts. Finished turning the faceplate, vacuumed up all the swarf, and I noticed something out of place. On the left side of the headstock, the bearing has worked itself completely out of the headstock. So I guess all that chattering when I was trying to take that really deep cut probably pushed this bearing out or helped it get out, but not good. I guess I'll have to tighten those bad boys up, maybe take a shim out. Hey, that'd be good. I was really pleased with how flat the faceplate turned out. After just a little bit of cleanup, the faceplate is ready for action. In upcoming videos, I'll be boring the tail stock. I'll be making a lathe dog and turning between centers to test for parallelism. If you value this content, consider supporting me on Patreon, where you can get access to exclusive content among other rewards. You can always get early access to project videos by going to makercise.com/signup. I hope this video inspires you to exercise your inner maker. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, share it with a friend. Thanks for watching.